If I told you that I knew a shortcut for how to effortlessly build reading comprehension skills in the classroom, would you be interested? Here it is. You just have to give your students lots and lots of time to practice reading. For the past 25 years, I've been using these strategies in my classroom with grades 4 and 5 students, but I think that they would work very well for grades 3 to 7. Students become better readers by doing a lot of reading. Do whatever you can to foster this. Make it the thing, the only thing that they are allowed to do when they finish their work. When I first started teaching, I used to come up with all kinds of activities for the early finishers to do when they were finished their work. I wanted to give them something that would keep them engaged so they would be focused and they wouldn't disturb the other students who were finishing up. I soon found out that this was a bit of a waste of my time. I didn't need to spend all this time planning and preparing materials because I could just get them to read when they are finished their work. Reading a book is the perfect activity to keep them quiet, and it builds their reading comprehension skills while they're doing it. Reading a book when you're finished your work requires no prep on my part. No explaining, no organizing, no cutting, no photocopying, no labeling, no cleaning, no marking. It's the simplest thing ever. When it becomes the classroom norm that reading is the thing that you do when you're finished your work, most of the students will do it most of the time. A lot of the extension activities that I was creating for my early finishers were really just busy work. Reading is the best use of their time. Not only do students become better readers by spending a lot of time practicing reading, but they learn a lot of things while they're reading. And I'm not just talking about science books or history books. They can learn about how to navigate life, how to navigate relationships. Students are highly social and impressionable in grades 4 and 5, and I would imagine to some degree in all the grades. They read what they see their peers reading. They copy each other. They talk about the books. So by having the early finishers reading when they're finished their work, they are modeling reading for the other students. I use a lot of psychological tricks to make reading seem like the reward. If I see a student reading before their task is done, I might say, eat your vegetables first, then you can have your dessert. Or work first, then play. Or jobs first, and then you get to relax. But what if students don't like to read? If the material is accessible to them, if it's at their reading level, and there's nothing else for them to do at that moment, they will learn to like it. If they are given a choice between sitting and doing nothing or reading, they'll choose reading. That's why I don't let them draw when they're finished their work. We do plenty of drawing in class. The stuff behind me is from an activity where students had to copy a picture from a coloring book. So these aren't traced, these are actually drawn. And students love drawing, but I save it for art time because when you're finished your work, that's when you read. Sometimes I write a list on the board of things to do when you're done your work, such as going ahead in math, or helping a classmate, or working on an ongoing project, or studying for an upcoming test. But most of the time, the norm is, when you're done your work, you read a book. What about the kids who are never the early finishers? Unfortunately, the only time they really read is during silent reading time. I usually allot about 15 to 20 minutes a day for silent reading. Sometimes, if I'm marking a test that they did in the morning, I might extend silent reading to half an hour. You'll have to adjust the time that students can spend reading based on the reading stamina of your class. I know that a lot of grade 3 teachers make it the goal to increase the reading stamina of their class, but by grade 4 they can usually read for 20 minutes without stopping. Diary of a Wimpy Kid is the most well-read series in my classroom. I have multiple copies of every book, and I bought most of them from the coupons that I earned from the Scholastic Reading Club that I did with my class. If you don't do the Scholastic program, I've put links in the show notes below this video where you can buy these books on Amazon if you're interested. If Diary of a Wimpy Kid is not engaging enough for some of your most reluctant readers, I find that comic books sometimes do the trick. They like Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, and other books that are funny, and even if they don't understand all the words they're reading, they can get the general idea by looking at the pictures. Another thing that I found is that organizing books by series is a great strategy to get students reading in the classroom. I got most of the series of books that I have in my classroom from library discount sales or from the Scholastic orders that I do with my class. I have some mini units or lessons that get students excited about talking about their reading, and this serves the function of getting other students interested in what their classmates are saying are their favorite books. In one of these mini units, I introduce students to the common themes of literature. They love to see all the examples and talk about stories that they've read that have those themes. One year, I recorded all the examples that students came up with on the posters that I had made introducing all the themes of literature. I often refer back to these universal themes when we read novels as a class, during a read aloud, or for a novel study, or when we do lit circles together. I ask the class to tell me different examples from the stories we read that fit under the different themes. In addition to silent reading, we also have a lot of time that we spend reading aloud. I only ask for student volunteers when it comes to reading aloud because I want them to be able to feel comfortable in doing it. As it usually takes a bit longer for the less fluent readers to read aloud, I just have the ones who read word by word read a shorter passage than those who can read aloud fluently. This helps to prevent the other students from getting bored and fidgety. The good thing about having less fluent students volunteer to read aloud is that it often helps boost the confidence of others who might have been hesitant to volunteer if their reading isn't quite as fluent as they hear their classmates. Maybe they're thinking, well, I can read as well as that, or better than that, or, well, if nobody laughed at that person, then they won't laugh at me if I make a mistake. Or maybe even, I'm going to volunteer to read because it's more interesting than listening to someone else read. I also have a little system for recording student volunteers so I don't have to stop and wait and ask for a volunteer each time after a student finishes reading. What I do is I just say we're going to do some reading aloud and can I have some volunteers please? And then the students put up their hand and I write down their student number or write down their name if you don't use student numbers. And then we just start going through the list and each student takes a turn. I just say thank you when I tell them that they've read enough. And they don't always read the same amount as their peers. It sort of depends on the amount of time it takes for them to read a passage. If students want to add their name to the list after we've already started reading, I just add their name to the bottom of the list. Sometimes they weren't paying attention when I was asking for volunteers, but after the class gets settled and we start reading, they realize what's going on and they too want to volunteer, so they raise their hand once we've already started. So I just write their number on the bottom of the list. Sometimes students change their mind and they put up their hand and they say, I've changed my mind, I don't want to read anymore, and that's fine. And if we get to the bottom of the list and there's still more reading to do, depending on the pace that they're reading or how the pacing is going in general, I might finish off the passage or I might just go to the top of the list and get the students to continue reading in the order that we originally had. If we run out of time and we haven't gotten through the whole list, I just use the list of names as a bookmark, and when we pick up the lesson the next day, then we continue on with the volunteers from the day before. On a class list, I record a check mark beside the students who volunteered to read, and if I notice that STEM students haven't volunteered to read in a long time, I might specifically ask them, would you like to volunteer to read today? And sometimes a little bit of encouragement gets them to do that. Or I might say, I'm only accepting volunteers from people who didn't get to read last time. I also make notes as they're reading aloud, whether it is fluently, which I mark with an F, or word by word, which I mark with a W. If it's read with expression, I mark with an E. Usually it's fluently or fluently with expression. It's a little less common to have word by word with expression, but sometimes that happens. To assess the reading aloud fluency of the students who don't volunteer to read in class, I sometimes just have them read to me privately. What I do is I wait until it's prep time when another teacher is teaching my class, and then I ask the students to come and read to me privately so that the classmates don't hear them reading, because sometimes they're shy about that. In my class, we have our assessments on a digital portfolio, so at the beginning and the end of the year, I get all my students to read aloud to me and I record their reading on an iPad. So what I do is I just have the student sit beside me and I film the book. I don't film the student. And I film them for about a minute and I just ask them to read a passage aloud. And then when they're done, I say, thanks for reading that, or good job, or well done. And it's very quick and matter of fact. I can usually get through a whole class in one prep block. And that serves as a time sample to show their reading fluency over the course of the year. In the write-up to the parents for the reading fluency post, I make sure that I make clear that this is not an assessment of reading comprehension, but rather just the ability to read fluently. You can search online for series of books that are popular with students in the age that you teach. I asked my students today to write on the board their favorite series or their favorite books, and they were pretty excited to do that. Popular series at the grade 4 or 5 level include The Babysitter's Club, Amulet, Bone, Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, I Survived, Dogman, Wings of Fire, Whatever After, Dork Diaries, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Warriors, Harry Potter, The Secret Series, Pokemon, and Geronimo Stilton. Another reason why reading is a good use of students' time when they are finished their work is because doing lots of reading definitely transfers to students' writing skills. because they have correct writing modeled for them in the reading that they're doing. When I'm pointing out to students how to improve their writing in some way, I'll often use the books in the classroom as examples to do that. For example, I might show how different paragraphs show different topics, or how when you have a new speaker, it's in a new paragraph. Each time the speaker changes, it becomes a new paragraph. Fluent readers with a little bit of guidance are well on their way to become fluent writers. With sentences that flow and have a rhythm to them, ideas expressed in an organized and coherent way, and a nice variety in word choice and descriptive vocabulary. I also do my best to help parents understand the importance of supporting reading at home. In my students' digital portfolio post under Reading Comprehension, I wrote to parents, "The best way to improve reading comprehension is to practice reading for at least 30 minutes a day. You can skim the book to ask questions to check for understanding or to check if your child knows what the bigger words mean. Many students are able to read aloud fluently, but when asked questions about the passage, they are missing key details. Reading sight words and decoding, or sounding out new words, is an essential step in reading development. However, reading aloud fluently doesn't always mean the child is understanding what they are reading, and that's why the questions are an important part of building reading comprehension skills. Children enjoy being read to even after they are reading fluently, so taking turn reading passages from a book before bed is a nice way to practice reading. If your child already chooses to read for pleasure, great. If your child has not yet discovered the joys of reading, it may be because they are still in a phase where reading feels like work, not fun. Do everything you can to get your child to read for at least 30 minutes a day. Don't let them play on the iPad, for example, until they have read for half an hour. Eventually, all that practice will pay off and reading will feel easy. Then it's just a matter of hooking them with a great series and you will likely have a reader for life. If you are looking for online resources to practice reading, do a Google search for free online reading practice or click the links below. I will also include links to different reading sites in the description below this video. As far as direct instruction of reading comprehension skills, my favorite resource is Reading Power by Adrienne. I will link to that book below this video as well. Briefly, the reading power strategies involve doing the following as you read: making connections, asking thoughtful questions, visualizing, inferring, and transforming your thinking based on what was read. Once the children are familiar with these strategies, you can incorporate them into future lessons and discussions about what they are reading. Please share in the comments below what strategies you have found to be helpful in getting your students excited about reading. I test my students' reading comprehension levels at the beginning and the end of each year, and I find that most of my students move up 2 or more grades in their reading comprehension scores in a single year. The more time students spend reading, the better they will get at reading. The easier it is for them to read, the more they will enjoy it. And the more they enjoy it, the more they will do it. And so it's a virtuous cycle. Fostering a love of reading with your students does not have to be a ton of work for you as a teacher. If you have found this video to be helpful, please share it with other teacher friends that you have, and hopefully we can all continue to share resources and shortcuts to make our teaching lives easier and more joyful, and to help our students. Thank you.